The stars looked peaceful through the windows of the horizon's edge. The ship moved quietly through space, far from Earth and far from any planet humans called home. Inside the command center, Captain Daniel Murray sat in his chair and watched the screens in front of him. He had been doing this job for 5 years now, and most days were quiet. Most days nothing interesting happened at all. Lisa Hayes sat at her station nearby. She was the communications officer, which meant she listened to all the signals that came through space. Most of the time, she heard nothing but static and automated messages from cargo ships. She wore headphones and stared at her screens, looking for anything unusual. "Captain," Lisa said suddenly. Her voice was excited. "I'm picking up something strange." Daniel sat up straight. "What kind of strange?" "It's an emergency beacon," Lisa replied. She pressed some buttons on her console. "But it's old. Really old. The signal is weak and broken up." Daniel stood and walked over to her station. He looked at the screen over her shoulder. The signal pattern looked ancient, nothing like the modern beacons used by ships today. "Can you clean it up?" Daniel asked. Lisa nodded and started working. Her fingers moved quickly across the controls. Slowly, the signal became clearer. When she finally played the message, everyone in the command center stopped what they were doing to listen. The voice was filtered through the computer, translated from an alien language. "This is Research Station Vraxis 9. We need help. The experiment has failed. We are sealing ourselves in stasis pods. Please, someone find us, anyone. We don't want to die here." The message ended. The room was quiet for a moment. "How old is that signal?" Daniel asked. Lisa checked her computer. According to the timestamp, it's 300 years old. Jake Peterson, the first officer, walked over to join them. He was a tall man with gray hair and a serious face. 300 years? They must be dead by now. "Maybe not," Lisa said. "They said they were going into stasis pods. If the pods still have power, they could still be alive." Daniel felt something stir in his chest. These people had been waiting for rescue for 300 years. They had put themselves to sleep hoping someone would find them. Someone had to try. "Where is this station?" Daniel asked. Jake pulled up a star map on the main screen. A red dot appeared in a region of space that was colored dark red. "It's in the Crimson Void." Everyone in the command center became quiet again. The Crimson Void was famous throughout the galaxy, and not in a good way. It was a region of space that most ships avoided. The radiation was extreme. The gravity was unstable, and dangerous creatures lived there. "What's the planet classification?" Daniel asked. Jake checked the database. His face became grim. Class 12 Deathworld. Crushing gravity, toxic atmosphere, constant volcanic activity. The planet orbits a dying star. Amy Ross, the chief engineer, whistled low. She was a small woman with short black hair and oil stains on her uniform. "No wonder nobody has rescued them yet. That place would tear most ships apart." Daniel thought about the message. He thought about people sleeping in pods for 300 years, waiting for help that never came. He thought about giving up on them, leaving them there, and he knew he couldn't do it. "Send a message to the Galactic Council," Daniel said. "Tell them what we found. They'll want to organize a rescue mission." Lisa sent the message. They waited. 2 hours later, a response came back. Lisa read it, and her face showed her anger. "What does it say?" Daniel asked. "It's from Council Administrator Zelvith," Lisa said. "He says the Council already knows about Vraxis 9. They tried to rescue the station 4 times. All 4 missions failed. The Council considers the researchers lost. We are ordered to mark the location in our records and continue our patrol." "That's it?" Amy said. "Just leave them there?" Jake shook his head. "The Council is right to be cautious. 4 missions failed. That means 4 crews died trying to help. We can't throw more lives away on a mission that has no chance of success." Daniel understood Jake's point. It made sense from a logical perspective. But logic wasn't everything. Sometimes you had to do what was right even when it wasn't logical. "I want to call a meeting," Daniel said. "All senior officers in the conference room in 1 hour. We're going to talk about this." 1 hour later, the senior officers gathered around the table in the conference room. Daniel sat at the head of the table. Jake sat on his right, Amy on his left. Across from them sat Greg Turner, the medical officer, and Kevin Brooks, the security chief. Greg was older, with white hair and kind eyes. Kevin was young and strong, a former soldier. "You all heard the message," Daniel said. "You all know what the Council said. I want to know what you think we should do." "The Council gave us an order," Jake said. "We should follow it. I know it feels wrong, but 4 ships already tried. 4 ships failed. What makes us think we can succeed where they couldn't? Because we're human, Kevin said. His voice was firm. Earth is a death world too. We grew up in dangerous conditions. Maybe we can handle that planet better than other species can. That's a big maybe, Jake replied. We're talking about risking this entire crew on a maybe. Greg spoke up. His voice was calm and thoughtful. I took an oath when I became a doctor. I swore to help people who need help. Those researchers need help. If we don't try, who will? Amy leaned forward. I've been looking at the data from the failed missions. They all use standard council ships. Our ship is different. We've modified the Horizon's Edge with human technology. Our shields are stronger. Our engines are more flexible. I think we have a better chance than those other ships did. Daniel listened to them all. He looked at each face around the table. These were good people, all of them. They had different opinions, but they all cared about doing the right thing. I'm going to be honest with you, Daniel said. I want to try the rescue, but I won't order anyone to come with me. This mission could kill us all. If we vote to do this, it has to be unanimous. Everyone has to agree. And if we don't all agree, Jake asked, then we follow the council's orders and move on, Daniel said. I won't divide this crew over this. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Kevin raised his hand. I vote yes. Let's go get them. Greg raised his hand. Yes, we have to try. Amy raised her hand. Yes, I think we can do this. Everyone looked at Jake. He sat quietly thinking. Finally, he sighed and raised his hand. Yes, I think you're all crazy, but I won't let you go without me. Daniel felt relief wash over him. He raised his hand too. Then it's unanimous. We're going to Vraxis 9. Lisa's voice came through the communication system. Captain, we're receiving an encrypted message. It's from Commander Helen Carter of the Earth Defense Fleet. Put it through, Daniel said. Helen's face appeared on the screen. She was a stern woman with sharp eyes. Captain Murray, I've been monitoring your communications. I know what you're planning. I can't officially support you, but unofficially, I'm sending you some upgraded shield modifications. They might help in the Crimson Void. Thank you, Commander, Daniel said. Bring them home, Captain, Helen said. Show the galaxy what humans can do. The screen went dark. Daniel looked at his officers. They all looked back at him with determination in their eyes. Set course for the Crimson Void, Daniel said. Let's go save some lives. The Horizon's Edge turned toward the dark red region of space. As they approached, the ship's computer started showing warnings. Every species that had been to the Crimson Void had left messages in the database. The messages all said the same thing in different ways. Danger, death, turn back. But the crew of the Horizon's Edge didn't turn back. They kept going forward, toward the impossible rescue, toward the place where 4 other crews had died trying to help. They kept going because somewhere in that darkness 12 people were sleeping in pods, waiting for someone to care enough to save them. And humans always cared enough. The moment the Horizon's Edge crossed into the Crimson Void, everything changed. The smooth journey through normal space became rough and chaotic. The ship shook and rattled. Alarms started beeping on multiple consoles. Ryan Mitchell gripped his controls tightly. He was the navigator, responsible for keeping the ship on course. But the course kept changing. Invisible forces pulled at the ship from every direction. It felt like trying to steer through a storm where the wind came from everywhere at once. Gravity fields are unstable, Ryan said through gritted teeth. I'm compensating, but it's like nothing I've ever seen before. Daniel watched the main screen. Outside, space didn't look like space anymore. Clouds of red and orange particles filled the view. Lightning jumped between the clouds even though there was no atmosphere for lightning to exist in. The laws of physics seemed different here. How long until we reach Vraxis 9? Daniel asked. Should be 3 days, Ryan said. But at this rate, it might take a week trapped in this chaos. Daniel could see the strain on Ryan's face already. Can you handle it? Ryan nodded. I'll manage. Just going to be a long week. The days blended together. The crew worked in shifts, always monitoring the ship's systems. Strange things happened in the Crimson Void. Equipment would fail for no reason, then start working again moments later. The temperature inside the ship would suddenly drop, then return to normal. Everyone started seeing things in the corners of their eyes, shadows that weren't really there. On the 4th day, the sensors detected movement. Large objects were approaching the ship, moving fast. What are those? Daniel asked. Amy studied her screen. I'm not sure. They're not ships. They're reading as some kind of mineral composition, but they're moving like living things. The objects came closer. Through the window, the crew could see them now. They looked like snakes made of crystal, dozens of them, each one as long as the ship. They moved through space like fish swimming through water, their bodies glowing with internal light. Void serpents, Jake said quietly. He had been reading the old reports. Previous explorers encountered them. They feed on energy. As if responding to his words, the serpents changed direction. They all turned toward the horizon's edge and began moving faster. They're attacking, Kevin said. He was already at the weapons station. Permission to fire? Granted, Daniel said. But try not to kill them unless you have to. They're just animals. Kevin fired the ship's defensive weapons. Energy beams shot out and struck several serpents. The beams passed through their crystalline bodies, making them glow brighter. The serpents didn't slow down. They got faster. The weapons are feeding them, Amy said. They're eating the energy. Stop firing, Daniel ordered. Amy, any ideas? Amy's fingers flew across her console. She was thinking fast, the way she always did when a problem needed solving. If they eat energy, maybe we can make ourselves taste bad. Give me a minute. She worked quickly, adjusting the ship's power systems. She changed the way the engines emitted radiation, modifying the frequency and pattern. The serpents were almost at the ship now. Everyone held their breath. Then the serpents stopped. They circled the ship once, as if confused. Then they turned away and swam back into the red clouds. They were gone. What did you do? Daniel asked. Amy smiled. I made our emissions toxic to them. As far as they can tell, we're poisoned now. They'll leave us alone. Good work, Daniel said. He felt proud of his crew. They adapted quickly, solved problems under pressure. These were the qualities you needed to survive in places like the Crimson Void. But Amy's solution gave Daniel an idea. He called Greg Turner to the command center. Greg, I need you to check something, Daniel said. Run medical scans on everyone who has military experience. Compare them to the civilians on board. Greg looked confused but did as asked. 20 minutes later, he came back with results that surprised him. This is strange, Greg said. The military personnel are showing higher adrenaline levels, faster reaction times, and better focus. It's like the stress of this environment is making them perform better instead of worse. Evolution, Jake said. He understood what Daniel was thinking. Humans evolved on Earth, a dangerous planet. Our bodies respond to danger by becoming stronger and faster. The stress triggers us to perform at our peak. Exactly, Daniel said. Other species might shut down in an environment like this, but humans are built for it. On the 7th day, Vraxis 9 appeared on the sensors. The planet looked terrible on the screen. It was dark red, almost black, with swirls of yellow and orange in the atmosphere. Lightning storms covered half the planet. Volcanoes dotted the surface, spewing lava into the sky. That's our destination? Lisa said quietly. That's it, Daniel confirmed. The research station is built into a cliff on the northern continent. Jake studied the readings. The gravity is 2.3 times Earth normal. Most council species couldn't even stand up in that gravity. The atmosphere is toxic. Temperature at the surface is hot enough to melt lead, and those storms never stop. Can we land the ship? Daniel asked Amy. Amy shook her head. Not safely. The horizon's edge isn't built for atmospheric entry in conditions like that. We'd break apart before we reach the surface. Then we take a shuttle, Daniel said. A small team goes down while the ship stays in orbit. He looked around the command center. He needed to choose who would come with him. This was going to be the most dangerous part of the mission. I'm going, Daniel said. Jake, you'll stay here and command the ship. If something happens to us down there, you get everyone else home safely. Jake started to protest, but Daniel raised his hand. That's an order. The ship needs a captain. I'm going, Kevin said. If there's trouble down there, you'll need security. I'm going too, Amy said. You'll need an engineer to get into that station. The door's probably sealed or broken after 300 years. I should go, Greg said. If those people are still alive in stasis pods, they'll need immediate medical attention. And I'm going, Ryan added. You'll need your best pilot to get through that atmosphere. Daniel looked at his team. 5 people, including himself. It was a small group, but they were the best he had. And more importantly, they were volunteers. Nobody was being forced into this. All right, Daniel said. Amy, I want you to modify the shuttle. Reinforce everything you can. We launch in 6 hours. Amy headed to the shuttle bay immediately. She gathered her engineering team and got to work. They reinforced the hull with extra plating. They upgraded the shields to maximum strength. They installed backup systems for every critical function. If the primary engines failed, there were secondary engines. If those failed, there were tertiary engines. While Amy worked on the shuttle, the rest of the team prepared themselves. Kevin checked weapons and equipment. Greg packed medical supplies. Ryan studied the atmospheric patterns, looking for the safest approach vector. Daniel reviewed everything they knew about the research station. 6 hours passed quickly. The team gathered in the shuttle bay. The shuttle was named Tenacity, which seemed appropriate. They would need tenacity to survive what was coming. Sophie Grant approached Daniel before he boarded. She was a lieutenant, young but capable. "Captain, let me go instead of you. You're too valuable to risk." Daniel smiled at her. "I appreciate that, Sophie, but I can't ask my crew to do something I won't do myself. If this mission fails, someone needs to survive to tell Earth what happened. That's you and Jake." Sophie looked like she wanted to argue more, but she saluted instead. "Good luck, sir." The team boarded the Tenacity. The shuttle doors closed. Ryan sat in the pilot's seat and started the engines. Daniel strapped into his seat and looked at his team. They all looked nervous but determined. "Ready?" Daniel asked. They all nodded. "Then let's go save some lives," Daniel said. The shuttle launched from the horizon's edge and turned toward the planet. As they approached the atmosphere, the turbulence began. The shuttle shook violently. Ryan fought the controls, using every bit of his skill to keep them on course. Lightning struck the shuttle. The shields flared bright blue. Warning alarms sounded. The temperature inside the shuttle climbed despite the cooling systems. Losing altitude control, Ryan shouted over the noise. "The winds are too strong." A massive gust hit them sideways. The shuttle spun. Everyone was thrown against their restraints. Equipment broke loose and flew through the cabin. "Primary engines are failing," Amy said. She was already working on the problem, her fingers flying over the controls. The shuttle began to fall. Through the window, Daniel could see the ground rushing up at them. This was it. They were going to crash. Then Amy rerouted power from life support to the engines. The engines roared back to life just seconds before impact. Ryan pulled up hard and the shuttle leveled out mere meters above the ground. They flew low over the volcanic landscape, dodging geysers of lava and walls of stone. Finally, they reached the coordinates. The research station came into view, built into the side of a massive cliff, and surrounding the station were the wrecks of 4 ships. The previous rescue attempts. They had all failed here in sight of their goal. Ryan landed the Tenacity near the station entrance. The shuttle's landing gear touched down on the black rock. For a moment, everyone just sat there, breathing hard, grateful to be alive. "Everyone okay?" Daniel asked. They all confirmed they were fine, though shaken. Daniel looked. The team stepped out of the shuttle into hell. That was the only word that fit. The heat hit them immediately, even through their protective suits. The air was thick with sulfur and ash. Every breath the suits filtered smelled like rotten eggs. The ground beneath their feet was black volcanic rock, still warm from recent lava flows. Daniel looked up at the research station. It was built directly into the cliff face, a gray structure that looked like it had been carved from the mountain itself. The entrance was a large metal door sealed shut. Around the door, rust and chemical corrosion had eaten away at the metal, but what caught Daniel's attention were the wrecked ships nearby. 4 of them scattered around the landing area. They had been broken apart, their hulls torn open. Daniel had assumed the planet's environment had destroyed them. Now looking closer, he wasn't so sure. "Kevin, look at this," Daniel said, pointing to one of the wrecks. Kevin examined the damaged hull. His face, visible through the helmet, went serious. "These are weapon burns. Energy weapons. Something shot at these ships. The environment didn't kill them," Greg said quietly. "Something else did." Amy was already at the station door with her equipment. She set up a portable plasma cutter and started working on creating an entrance. The metal was thick and corroded. It would take time. While Amy worked, Kevin scanned the area with his weapon raised. The volcanic landscape stretched in every direction. Lava rivers glowed in the distance. Ash fell like snow, coating everything. And somewhere out there something moved. "Contact," Kevin said sharply. 2 o'clock, about 500 meters out. Daniel looked where Kevin indicated. At first he saw nothing but ash and smoke. Then shapes moved through the haze. Large shapes moving with purpose. "What are they?" Ryan asked. Kevin adjusted his scanner. Life forms, big ones. The computer is calling them Vraxis hunters. They're the apex predators on this planet. Can they hurt us? Greg asked. Unknown, Kevin said. But they took down 4 ships. I'd rather not find out. Amy, how much longer? Daniel asked. Almost through, Amy said. Sparks flew from her cutter as it ate through the metal. Just another minute. The shapes in the distance were getting closer. Daniel could see them better now. They looked like giant insects with bodies covered in crystalline armor that reflected the red light of the planet. They moved on multiple legs, fast and coordinated. They're hunting, Kevin said. They've spotted us. The plasma cutter finally broke through. The door fell inward with a crash. We're in, Amy shouted. Everyone inside now. The team rushed through the opening. Kevin went last, backing through while keeping his weapon trained on the approaching creatures. The moment they were all inside, Amy activated a portable force field across the entrance. It wouldn't hold forever, but it might buy them time. Inside the station, everything was dark. Their helmet lights cut through the blackness, illuminating corridors covered in dust and ice. The temperature dropped dramatically. Outside was hot enough to melt metal. Inside was cold enough to freeze water. The station still has minimal power, Amy said, checking a wall panel. Emergency systems only. That's good news. The stasis pods might still be operational. They moved deeper into the station. Their boots crunched on frost that covered the floor. Everything was silent except for their breathing and footsteps. The station felt dead, abandoned like a tomb. Daniel noticed something on the walls as they walked. Scratch marks, deep gouges in the metal. Something had tried to claw its way through the walls from the inside. What made those marks? Ryan asked nervously. Let's hope we don't find out, Daniel replied. They found a computer terminal that still had power. Amy connected her portable equipment and downloaded the station's logs. While she worked, Daniel read the entries on the screen. The logs told a story. The research team had been studying a rift in spacetime. They wanted to use it for faster travel between stars. But the experiment had gone wrong. The rift had started expanding and they couldn't stop it. They had sealed themselves in stasis pods and sent their distress call. But there was more. The later log entries mentioned strange things. Shadows that moved on their own. Equipment that operated by itself. Scientists who started acting strange, saying they heard voices. The rift attracted something, Greg said, reading over Daniel's shoulder. Something from another dimension. Great, Kevin muttered. Just what we need. Ghost stories. They continued through the station until they reached a large chamber. Inside were 12 stasis pods arranged in 2 rows. Lights on the pods blinked weakly. The Keltheran researchers were still inside, still alive after 300 years of sleep. They made it, Greg said with relief. The pods are still functioning. Amy immediately began connecting portable power units to the pods. The pods are almost out of power. Maybe days left, maybe hours. We got here just in time. Can we move them? Daniel asked. Not yet, Greg said. They need to stay in the pods until we can get them to proper medical facilities. If we wake them here in these conditions, they might die. Then we'll take the pods with us, Daniel said. Amy, can the shuttle carry them? If we remove some non-essential equipment, yes, Amy said. But we'll need to make multiple trips. The shuttle can't carry all 12 at once, not with this gravity. Then we make multiple trips, Daniel said. Kevin, you and Ryan take 4 pods back to the shuttle. Greg and Amy will prep the rest. I'm going to explore further, see if there's anything else we need to know. Kevin looked like he wanted to argue about splitting up, but he nodded. He and Ryan began the careful process of disconnecting 4 pods from the station's power and connecting them to portable units. Daniel moved deeper into the station alone. His helmet light cut through the darkness ahead of him. He followed signs pointing to the research laboratory where the rift experiment had taken place. The laboratory was enormous. At its center, suspended in a web of equipment, was the rift itself. It looked like a tear in reality, a wound in space that shouldn't exist. Looking at it made Daniel feel sick and dizzy. Colors that didn't have names swirled inside it, and emerging from the rift were shadows. Dark shapes that weren't quite solid and weren't quite gas. They moved slowly like they were swimming through thick water. As Daniel watched, one of the shadows detached from the rift and began floating toward him. Daniel backed away. He tried to contact his team on the radio, but only static came through. The shadow was getting closer. It seemed to notice him now, turning in his direction. Then Daniel saw more shadows throughout the room. Dozens of them. They had been there all along, he just hadn't noticed them in the darkness. They were everywhere in the station, spreading like an infection. These were what had trapped the researchers. These were what had attacked the previous rescue teams. And now they were coming for Daniel. He ran back toward his team. The shadows followed, moving faster now, no longer slow and dreamlike. They flowed through the corridors like water, passing through walls as if the walls weren't there. Daniel burst into the chamber where his team was working. "We need to leave now. What's wrong?" Kevin asked, reaching for his weapon. "The station isn't empty," Daniel said. "There are things here. Things from the rift." As if responding to his words, the temperature dropped even further. Frost formed on the walls, spreading rapidly. The lights flickered. Equipment began to fail, and the shadows began to appear in the chamber. They emerged from the walls, from the floor, from the ceiling. They surrounded the team, cutting off the exit. Kevin fired his weapon at one. The energy beam passed right through it, hitting the wall beyond. The shadow wasn't affected at all. "They're not physical," Amy said. "They exist partially in another dimension. Normal weapons won't work." One shadow reached for Greg. He backed away, but it followed him. When it touched his suit, the suit's systems began to fail. The temperature gauge dropped. The power level decreased. It was draining energy from everything it touched. They feed on energy, Daniel realized, just like the void serpents. But these are smarter. They've been trapped here for 300 years, feeding on the station's power. "Then how do we fight them?" Ryan asked. Amy was already thinking, working on a solution. She pulled equipment from her pack and began assembling something. "If they're partially energy-based, an electromagnetic pulse might disrupt them. Give me 30 seconds." The shadows were getting closer. They moved toward the stasis pods now, drawn to the power units Amy had connected. If they drained those power units, the researchers inside would die. "Faster, Amy," Daniel said. 20 seconds, Amy replied, her hands working quickly. A shadow reached the nearest stasis pod. It began to feed and the power level dropped rapidly. The researcher inside the pod would die in moments. 10 seconds, Amy said. Kevin put himself between the shadows and the pods. He couldn't hurt them with his weapon, but he could slow them down, force them to go through him first. Other shadows reached for him. "Done," Amy shouted. She activated the device. An electromagnetic pulse burst from the device in all directions. The shadows recoiled as if they had been struck. They dispersed, becoming transparent, less solid. For a moment, the chamber was clear. "That won't hold them long," Amy said. "We have minutes, maybe less." "Then we move now," Daniel ordered. "Grab as many pods as we can carry. We're leaving." The team began moving, carrying the heavy stasis pods between. Daniel looked at the Vraxis hunters outside and the shadows inside. Both were deadly. Both wanted to kill them. But the hunters were physical. They could be hurt. The shadows couldn't. "We go through the hunters," Daniel said. "Amy, drop the force field." "Kevin, clear us a path." Everyone else moved the pods to the shuttle as fast as possible. Amy hesitated. "Captain, there are at least 20 hunters out there." "I know," Daniel said. "But we don't have a choice. The shadows are adapting. Soon the EMP won't even slow them down." Kevin checked his weapon. "I'll need covering fire." "You'll have it," Daniel said. He grabbed a spare weapon from Kevin's pack. Ryan and Greg did the same. Only Amy stayed focused on the pods, ready to move them the moment the way was clear. "On three," Daniel said. 1, 2, 3, Amy dropped the force field. Kevin was already moving, running out into the open. The Vraxis hunters screeched, a sound like metal scraping metal. They charged toward the entrance. Kevin fired. His weapon was set to maximum power. The energy beam struck the nearest hunter in its crystalline head. The creature's head exploded in a shower of crystal fragments. It collapsed, but 3 more took its place. Daniel, Ryan, and Greg fired from the entrance, giving Kevin cover. The hunters were fast, incredibly fast, but the humans had trained for combat. Their shots were accurate, controlled. 2 more hunters fell. "Move the pods," Daniel shouted to Amy. Amy and Greg grabbed the first pod and began carrying it toward the shuttle. The pod was heavy, crushing in the high gravity. Every step was agony, but they kept moving. Kevin fell back toward the entrance, still firing. A hunter leaped at him, claws extended. Kevin rolled to the side and fired point blank into the creature's underside. It crashed to the ground, twitching, but more hunters were coming. They seemed to be calling to each other, coordinating their attack. These weren't mindless animals. They were intelligent pack hunters. Amy and Greg reached the shuttle with the first pod and loaded it inside. They ran back for the second one. Daniel and Ryan provided covering fire while Kevin reloaded his weapon. A hunter broke through their defensive line. It ran straight for Amy and Greg, who were carrying the second pod. They couldn't move fast enough with the heavy pod between them. Ryan left the entrance and sprinted after the hunter. He was fast, faster than he should be in this gravity. The adrenaline in his system was overriding his exhaustion. He caught up to the hunter and fired at close range. The hunter fell, but its momentum carried it forward. It crashed into Amy and Greg, knocking them down. The pod fell and hit the ground hard. Lights on the pod flickered. "No," Greg shouted. He checked the pod's status. The power unit had been damaged in the fall. "It was failing. Can you fix it?" Daniel asked. "Not here," Greg said. "We need to get it to the shuttle. Maybe Amy can repair it there." They grabbed the pod again and continued toward the shuttle. Behind them, the shadows were emerging from the station. They flowed across the ground like oil heading for the team. "Faster," Daniel urged. He fired at both the hunters and the shadows, knowing his weapon was useless against one of them but unable to just stand and do nothing. Kevin saw the shadows coming. He pulled another EMP device from his belt and threw it. The device detonated behind the team, creating a pulse that dispersed the nearest shadows. But there were too many. They kept coming. The team loaded the second pod into the shuttle. Then the third. Then the fourth. Each trip was a battle. Each trip someone almost died. But they kept going, refusing to give up. On the sixth trip, Daniel stayed at the station entrance alone. Everyone else was carrying pods or providing cover from different positions. He fired at hunters, reloaded, fired again. His weapon was getting hot. His arms ached from the recoil. A massive shadow appeared in the doorway behind him. It was larger than the others, more solid. This was the primary entity, the thing that had first come through the rift. It had been feeding on the station's power for 300 years, growing stronger. The entity reached for Daniel. He felt his suit systems begin to fail. The temperature dropped so fast that frost formed on his visor. He couldn't see. He couldn't breathe. The suit's life support was dying. Daniel fell to his knees. He could feel the entity in his mind, searching through his memories. It was hungry, desperately hungry. It had been alone for so long, trapped in this place. But then the entity found something in Daniel's memories that made it pause. It saw Earth. It saw humanity's history, the millions of years of evolution on a deadly world. It saw predators that hunted humans. It saw diseases that killed millions. It saw wars and disasters and every terrible thing that humans had survived, and the entity understood something. Humans were not prey. Humans were predators themselves, shaped by a world that tried to kill them every day for millions of years. The entity had made a mistake. It had thought it had trapped the humans in here. But the humans had trapped it. The entity released Daniel and retreated. It flowed back toward the rift, away from the humans. It had chosen survival over hunger. It would return to its own dimension rather than face creatures from Earth's death world. Daniel gasped for air as his suit systems came back online. He stood on shaking legs and looked back into the station. The shadows were withdrawing, following the primary entity back to the rift. "The shadows are leaving," Daniel said into his radio. "I don't know why, but they're leaving." "Don't question it," Kevin replied. "Let's get the rest of these pods and get out of here." They moved faster now. Without the shadows attacking, they only had to deal with the hunters. And while the hunters were dangerous, they were something humans understood. They were physical threats that could be fought with weapons and tactics. The team loaded the remaining pods into the shuttle. All 12 researchers were secure, but Amy's face was grim as she checked the damaged pod. "I can fix it," she said, "but I need time and proper tools. We need to get back to the ship." "Then let's go," Daniel said. "Everyone on board." They piled into the shuttle. Ryan took the pilot's seat and started the engines. Outside, the hunters sensed their prey escaping. They charged the shuttle from all directions. "Hold on," Ryan said. He fired the thrusters at full power. The shuttle lifted off the ground just as the hunters reached it. Several leaped after them, but they fell short. The shuttle climbed through the toxic atmosphere, fighting the winds and the lightning. This time, the journey was easier. Ryan knew what to expect. He had flown this route before. He anticipated the wind patterns and avoided the worst turbulence. The shuttle shook and rattled, but it held together. They broke through the atmosphere and into space. The horizon's edge was waiting in orbit. Jake had moved the ship closer to minimize the distance they had to travel. The shuttle docked. The moment the airlock opened, Greg and his medical team rushed the pods to the medical bay. Amy went with them, carrying her tools to repair the damaged power unit. Daniel stayed on the shuttle for a moment, just breathing. They had done it. They had rescued all 12 researchers. Nobody had died. Against all odds, they had succeeded. He walked to the medical bay to check on progress. Greg was working on the damaged pod while Amy repaired the power unit. The other 11 pods were stable, connected to the ship's power supply. How long before you can wake them? Daniel asked. The process takes time, Greg said. We need to slowly bring their bodies out of stasis. Too fast and the shock could kill them. I'd say 12 hours for the first one, then we can start on the others. Take all the time you need, Daniel said. We're not in a hurry anymore. But Jake's voice came over the intercom. Captain, you need to see this. Daniel went to the command center. Jake pointed at the main screen. Another ship had appeared on the sensors. It was large, sleek, and carried the markings of the Galactic Council. It's Administrator Zelvith, Lisa said. He's hailing us. Put him on screen, Daniel said. Zelvith's face appeared. He was a carrion, tall and thin with blue skin and 4 arms. His expression was angry. Captain Murray, Zelvith said coldly, you have violated direct orders from the Galactic Council. You are ordered to transfer the Keltheran researchers to my ship immediately and return to Earth to face disciplinary action. Daniel felt his own anger rising. We just risked our lives to save those people. People you abandoned. The Council made a calculated decision, Zelvith said. Resources cannot be wasted on operations with low probability of success. You may have succeeded through luck, but that does not excuse your insubordination. Luck had nothing to do with it, Daniel said. We succeeded because we didn't give up. We succeeded because we believed every life is worth saving. Your emotional reasoning is exactly why humans are not ready for positions of authority in the Council, Zelvith replied. You cannot make decisions based on sentiment. Now transfer the researchers immediately. No, Daniel said simply. Zelvith's face darkened. If you refuse, I will impound your ship and take the researchers by force. Before Daniel could respond, another voice came over the communication channel. I don't think you will, Commander Helen Carter said. 3 Earth Defense Fleet ships appeared on the sensors, having just dropped out of faster-than-light travel. They positioned themselves between the horizon's edge and Zelvith's ship. Commander Carter, Zelvith said, his voice strained. This is an internal council matter. Earth Defense Fleet has no jurisdiction here. The journey to Nexus Prime took 5 days. During that time, Greg and his medical team carefully brought the Keltheran researchers out of stasis. The first to wake was Dr. Neral Kin, the leader of the research team. When her eyes opened and she saw humans standing around her bed, she looked confused. She tried to speak, but her voice was weak after 300 years of sleep. Greg gave her water and told her to rest. It took several hours before she could sit up and talk properly. Daniel came to visit her in the medical bay. He sat beside her bed and explained everything that had happened. 300 years, Dr. Kin whispered. Her voice was filled with sadness. Everyone I knew is dead. My family, my friends, all gone. I'm sorry, Daniel said. He meant it. He couldn't imagine waking up to find that centuries had passed. But you came for us, Dr. Kin said, looking at him with wonder. The Council sent 4 missions. They all failed. Why did you try when everyone else had given up? Because you needed help, Daniel said simply. That's reason enough. Dr. Kin's eyes filled with tears. In Keltheran culture, leaving no one behind was a sacred principle. She had believed her people were unique in holding that value. To learn that humans shared it created a deep connection. Over the next few days, all 12 researchers were successfully revived. They were weak and needed time to recover, but they would survive. Each one thanked the crew of the Horizon's Edge personally. Several cried. Several recorded messages to send to Earth, expressing gratitude to humanity. Dr. Kin spent hours talking with Daniel, learning about the galaxy as it existed now. When he told her that the Council had known the researchers were alive but chose to abandon them, she became angry. They left us to die to avoid embarrassment, Dr. Kin said. The experiment was their idea. They commissioned it. They pushed us to go faster, take more risks. And when it failed, they covered it up? That's what the logs suggest, Daniel said. I'm sorry. Don't apologize, Dr. Kin said firmly. You have nothing to apologize for, but the Council does, and when we reach Nexus Prime, I'm going to make sure everyone knows what they did. Word of the rescue spread quickly through galactic communication networks. News services broadcast the story across hundreds of worlds. The images of the horizon's edge emerging from the crimson void with all 12 researchers alive captured the imagination of billions. Many species celebrated the human success. Young people from various worlds sent messages of support and admiration. But the Council leadership was not happy. They saw the rescue as an embarrassment that exposed their failures. When the horizon's edge arrived at Nexus Prime, they found the space around the planet crowded with ships. Hundreds of vessels from across the galaxy had come to watch what would happen. Some were news ships broadcasting to their homeworlds. Others were simply curious observers who wanted to see the humans who had accomplished the impossible. The Council chamber was an enormous building that could hold representatives from over 500 species. It was built in the shape of a circle, with seating arranged in ascending tiers. At the center was a platform where speakers could address the assembly. Daniel stood on that platform now, with Dr. Narral Kin and her research team beside him. In the viewing galleries above, his crew watched alongside representatives from Earth's government. The chamber was filled with thousands of beings all watching to see what would happen. Administrator Zelvith opened the proceedings. He stood at his place in the assembly and spoke in a formal, cold voice. Captain Daniel Murray stands accused of violating direct orders from the Galactic Council, Zelvith said. He endangered his crew on a mission with minimal chance of success. While we acknowledge that the mission succeeded, success does not excuse insubordination. The Council's authority must be respected or chaos will follow. Other Council members spoke, echoing Zelvith's concerns. They argued that allowing such behavior would encourage other ships to ignore orders. They said humans were too young a species to understand how the Council worked. But then Dr. Kin was given the opportunity to speak. She walked to the center of the platform slowly. Her body was still weak from centuries of stasis, but her voice was strong and clear. I am Dr. Narral Kin, she began. 300 years ago, I led a research team studying a spatial rift. The experiment was commissioned by this council, by members who sit in this chamber today. When the experiment failed, we sealed ourselves in stasis pods and sent a distress call. We believed the council would save us. We trusted in the principles this organization was founded on. She paused, looking around the chamber. But the council chose to abandon us. Not because rescue was impossible. The humans proved it was possible. The council abandoned us to hide their involvement in a failed experiment. They chose politics over lives. The chamber erupted in noise. Representatives shouted questions. News services scrambled to report this revelation. Several council members demanded to see proof. Amy Ross stepped forward. She projected data from the research station's logs onto screens around the chamber. The logs showed communications between the research team and council officials. They showed pressure to rush the experiment. They showed warnings that were ignored. And they showed the decision to abandon the rescue efforts after 4 attempts failed. The decision was made in a closed council meeting. The reasoning was clear in the documents. Rescuing the researchers would require admitting the council's involvement in the failed experiment. The evidence was undeniable. The chamber fell into shocked silence. Then an elderly Telcash representative stood. Ambassador Corintel was respected throughout the galaxy. He had served on the council for over a century. I am ashamed, Ambassador Tell said quietly. His voice carried through the silent chamber. Ashamed of what we have become. This council was founded on principles of mutual aid and courage. We were supposed to help each other, to rescue those in danger, to value every life. When did we lose that? When did we become so focused on politics and image that we forgot our purpose? He turned to face the human crew. These humans have reminded us of what we were meant to be. They risked everything to save people they had never met. They succeeded where we failed. Not because they are stronger or smarter, but because they refused to give up. They showed true courage. Ambassador Tell looked around the chamber. I propose we establish a new organization. A rescue and recovery service that will operate in dangerous regions. A service that will respond to distress calls regardless of risk or cost. And I propose that this service be led by humans, who have proven they have both the capability and the will. The proposal caused more discussion. Some council members objected. saying it was too expensive and too risky, but others supported the idea enthusiastically. Representatives from younger generations especially liked the proposal. The debate lasted for hours. But finally, the proposal was put to a vote. The result was clear. The majority supported creating the new organization. Zelvith looked furious, but he had lost. The council had spoken, and his authority had been overruled. He left the chamber without saying another word. After the vote, Daniel was approached by representatives from dozens of species. They wanted to know if Earth would really lead this new organization. They wanted to know if humans would help their worlds when disasters struck. "We'll help anyone who needs it," Daniel said. "That's a promise." 6 months later, the new organization was officially established. It was called the Galactic Emergency Response and Recovery Service. Most people called it GERS, but among the crews who served in it, it had another name: the Deathworlders. Daniel was offered command of the entire organization, but he refused. He was a field officer, not an administrator. Instead, he accepted command of the first dedicated GERS vessel, a ship named the Endeavor. The ship was equipped with the most advanced technology available. Amy Ross had designed many of its systems, specifically for operations in extreme environments. Kevin Brooks trained security teams for the new organization. Greg Turner developed medical protocols for treating different species under stress. The first GERS station was built in orbit around Earth. It served as a training facility where volunteers from across the galaxy learned how to operate in dangerous conditions. Instructors taught survival techniques, emergency medicine, and combat tactics. Many of the techniques came from human military and disaster response programs. One of the early trainees was Ven Jor, a young Keltheran woman. She was Dr. Neralkin's daughter, born after her mother had been rescued. Inspired by the humans who saved her mother, Ven volunteered for GERS despite her species' low tolerance for harsh environments. "My mother told me about your courage," Ven said to Daniel during her training. "I want to learn to be brave like that." "Courage isn't about not being afraid," Daniel told her. "It's about doing what's right even when you are afraid. You can learn that." The Endeavor's first major mission came quickly. A colony ship carrying 3,000 Marini civilians suffered an engine failure near a rogue planet in deep space. The planet was frozen, with temperatures near absolute zero. The ship was breaking apart. When the council heard about the disaster, several members said rescue was impossible. The environment was too hostile. But Daniel and the Endeavor were already moving. They reached the rogue planet in record time. The rescue operation was difficult, and 2 years had passed since GERS was founded. The organization had grown from a single ship to a fleet of 20 specialized vessels. Training stations orbited 3 different worlds. Thousands of volunteers from hundreds of species had joined. Daniel Murray still commanded the Endeavor, the flagship of the fleet. His crew had become legends across the galaxy. They had completed over 50 rescue missions, each one more dangerous than anyone thought possible. They had saved thousands of lives, but success brought its own challenges. Not everyone was happy with GERS. Some council members still resented the organization. They saw it as a threat to their authority, a reminder of their failures. Administrator Zelvith had resigned in disgrace, but his allies remained in power. They worked quietly to undermine GERS, imposing regulations and cutting funding. The confrontation that had been building for 2 years finally came when disaster struck Nexus Prime itself. The council homeworld orbited a stable star that had been studied for thousands of years. Scientists believed they understood its behavior completely, but stars can be unpredictable. Without warning, the star produced a massive solar storm, far stronger than anything in recorded history. The storm struck Nexus Prime with devastating force. The planet's shields, designed for normal solar activity, were overwhelmed. Power grids failed across the planet. Millions of people were trapped in underground shelters as radiation levels climbed to lethal levels. The council leadership evacuated to orbital stations immediately. They assumed the planet's population would follow standard evacuation protocols. But chaos had taken over. Transportation systems were down. Communication networks were failing. Millions of people were scattered across the planet, unable to reach evacuation sites. The council called for member species to send protected vessels to extract important officials and essential personnel. It was a limited evacuation, prioritizing those the council deemed most valuable. The general population would have to wait until the radiation decreased, which could take weeks. But Daniel and the Endeavor were already on their way. Amy Ross had been monitoring the star's activity and had predicted the storm before it hit. They had jumped to faster-than-light travel immediately, arriving at Nexus Prime while the Council was still organizing its limited evacuation. "Captain, I'm receiving orders from the Council," Lisa said. "They're telling us to stand by and await instructions." "Ignore those orders," Daniel said. "We're beginning rescue operations immediately. Amy, coordinate with the other GERS ships in the area. Kevin, prep all landing teams. Greg, set up medical facilities to handle radiation exposure." 6 other GERS vessels were close enough to respond quickly. They arrived within hours and immediately joined the rescue effort. They didn't ask for permission. They didn't wait for approval. They just went to work. The Endeavor descended into Nexus Prime's atmosphere. The radiation was intense, far beyond what most species could tolerate. But humans had evolved on Earth, a planet with its own radiation exposure from cosmic rays and solar flares. Their bodies were more resistant than most species. Still, the radiation here was extreme even for humans. The crew wore heavy protective suits that made movement difficult. They had to work quickly because even the suits couldn't protect them indefinitely. Daniel led a team into the capital city. Buildings had collapsed when the power failed. Streets were blocked with debris. The sky glowed an eerie red from the radiation storm still raging above. They found a shelter 3 levels underground. The entrance had collapsed, trapping over 500 people inside. The shelter's life support was failing. The people inside had maybe 6 hours of air left. "Amy, can we cut through?" Daniel asked. Amy examined the collapsed entrance. Tons of concrete and steel blocked the way. It would take hours with cutting tools. "We don't have hours, then we dig," Kevin said. He started pulling debris away with his hands, piece by piece. The rest of the team joined him. It was slow, brutal work. The pieces were heavy. The radiation was cooking them even through their suits. But they kept digging. After 3 hours, they broke through. The people inside the shelter were terrified, huddled together in the darkness. When they saw the rescue team, many started crying with relief. "Everyone stay calm," Daniel said. "We're going to get you out of here. Follow us and stay close." They led the survivors to the surface where shuttles waited to transport them to orbit. Then they moved to the next shelter and the next. Each rescue was a race against time and radiation. Greg worked in a medical station set up in a radiation-protected zone. Injured people poured in constantly. Many had radiation sickness. Some had been crushed in collapsing buildings. Greg and his team worked without stopping, treating hundreds of patients. Amy and her engineering teams performed miracles. They found the planet's shield generators and managed to restart several of them. The generators were damaged and running on backup power from the Endeavor, but they created safe corridors where rescue operations could continue. Kevin led teams into the most dangerous zones, places where the radiation was so intense that exposure would be fatal within minutes. Workers were trapped in a fusion power plant that was on the verge of meltdown. If the plant exploded, it would kill millions. Kevin and his team entered the plant wearing suits so heavy they could barely move. They had 10 minutes, maybe less. They found the workers and dragged them out one by one. Kevin was the last to leave, carrying an unconscious engineer on his back. He made it outside just as his suit's radiation alarm screamed that he had received a dangerous dose. For 72 hours, GERS operated continuously. Nobody slept. They sustained themselves on stimulants and determination. Several crew members, including Daniel, suffered radiation poisoning, but they refused to stop working. By the time the crisis ended, GERS had evacuated over 2 million people. They had saved hundreds of thousands who would have died in the initial hours. They had prevented the fusion plant from melting down. They had done what the Council said was impossible. When the radiation finally decreased enough for the Council to return to the surface, they found the streets filled with celebrating citizens. People chanted the names of GERS crews, particularly the Endeavor. They painted murals on walls showing humans in protective suits carrying people to safety. Several Council members who had been trapped in an underground shelter when their evacuation transport was destroyed owed their lives to GERS. They had been rescued by Ryan Mitchell's team, who had cut through 50 meters of collapsed tunnel to reach them. The political impact was immediate and severe. Citizens across the planet were furious with the Council leadership. Their own government had prioritized saving important officials while leaving common people to die. Meanwhile, an outside organization led by humans had saved over 2 million lives without hesitation. Protests filled the streets. Representatives demanded investigations. News services broadcast images comparing the Council's limited evacuation efforts with Gersa's massive rescue operation. The contrast was damning. Ambassador Corin Tell called for a special session of the Council. The chamber was packed when it convened. Daniel was there, fresh from medical treatment for radiation exposure. He looked pale and tired, but he stood straight. "The Council has lost its way," Ambassador Tell said to the Assembly. "We saw our own people in danger, and our first instinct was to save ourselves and our allies. We made calculations about who was worth saving and who was not, and while we made those calculations, humans were down there pulling our people out of collapsed buildings." He pointed to Daniel. "This human suffered radiation poisoning, saving our citizens. So did dozens of his crew. They didn't ask for payment. They didn't ask for favorable trade agreements. They just helped because people needed help. That is what this council was supposed to be. That is what we have forgotten." Another representative stood. She was a young Keltharan named Dr. Lena Var, who had been elected to the council after the older generation was voted out. "I propose we restructure the council's emergency response protocols," Dr. Var said. "All future disasters should be coordinated with GERS. Furthermore, I propose we increase funding for GERS and grant them full authority to respond to emergencies without waiting for council approval." The proposal sparked intense debate. Some older council members objected, but they were outnumbered. The younger generation, inspired by GERS's example, voted overwhelmingly in favor, but Dr. Var wasn't finished. "I also propose we award Captain Daniel Murray the Star of Unity, the council's highest honor. He and his crew saved over 2 million of our people. They put their lives at risk for strangers. That deserves recognition." This proposal passed unanimously. Even the council members who disliked GERS couldn't oppose it publicly, not with millions of citizens demanding to honor their rescuers. The award ceremony was held 1 month later, after Daniel had recovered from radiation treatment. He stood in the council chamber, now wearing formal dress uniform. The Star of Unity, a crystal medallion that represented the best ideals of galactic civilization, was placed around his neck. But when Daniel was asked to give a speech, he deflected the praise. "I didn't save those people," Daniel said. "My crew did. The other GERS teams did. Ordinary people from dozens of species who chose to risk everything to help strangers. They are the real,